So today we're going to talk about relational aggression between girls. And I have a private Facebook group that I really encourage all of you who have middle schoolers and high schoolers to join. And it's called Adolescence, a Parent's Guide, a support group for parents of high schoolers. And in it, one of the members posed a question about the invisible girl. You know, the girl who nobody's really bullying, but just doesn't get the invitation, doesn't feel like she's really included, just feels invisible. And so I thought that was a great topic, and I started researching it, and I've decided that before we have an in-depth conversation about that type of social issue amongst girls, that I really wanted to tackle relational aggression first, because it's something that is usually experienced by teens, and it certainly has a reputation of being experienced more by girls. So I thought that as a precursor to a conversation about the invisible girl, that we would talk specifically about relational aggression. So that's what we're going to talk about today. Just a brief introduction about me. My name is Dr. Tara Egan. My doctorate is in school psychology, and I have additional training as a mental health clinician. And so I've been working as a therapist and as a parent coach for a long time. And I also host a podcast called One Day You'll Thank Me, which is a parenting podcast where we have different topics and different guests every week that offers their expert opinion. And so it's just another resource that's free and available to parents in addition to this Monday webinar series. So let's get started. Let's talk about what is relational aggression. Relational aggression is harm that is caused by damaging someone's relationships or social status. So this type of aggression isn't physical. You know, it's not someone getting pushed in the hallway or getting tripped on their way out to the field. It really is much more subtle, and it's used to bully, manipulate, or control others. And often, because it's very subtle, it stays under the radar of adults. So there'll be times in a classroom where girls, and it is more commonly associated with girls, are experiencing this. They're feeling that degree of rejection or being excluded, or as though people are talking about them or ruining their reputation. And it just happens under the radar. And we're going to talk about some different ways that it happens, but it can cause a girl to feel really stressed, really lonely and excluded, and it might not be something that's overt enough for the teacher to just notice in their day-to-day interaction with students. So I have a couple examples here, and we're going to talk about more of them. Things like excluding someone from a group, spreading rumors, breaking confidences or sharing secrets, and then recruiting others to dislike a target. Basically, like, if you hang out with her, I'm not going to be your friend. We're going to talk a little bit with some more specific examples. So signs of relational aggression. So these are things that teachers and parents should look for. And when I say they should look for it, they should look for it both in their child, as far as whether or not they're engaging in this type of behavior, or they should look for it to see if it's their own child is experiencing it. So ignoring others, talking badly about others, making fun of others, excluding others, leaving hurtful or mean messages. And I'm also going to include kind of passive aggressive messages like, you're so brave to be wearing that bathing suit. You go, girl, which of course is like, you're so brave to wear that despite looking horrible in it. I mean, those are things that can be a sign of relational aggression. Cyberbullying or shaming others online, slut shaming. And if you're not familiar what that means, it's basically saying degrading comments to other girls because they are wearing something that could be viewed as sexy, or they have a relationship with someone that they're making assumptions is physical. Just any kind of expression of sexuality is shamed. So that's what slut shaming is. Intimidating others or playing mean tricks. That is something that I see more and more. And how the perpetrator will state it is, I was just kidding. I was just joking. When in reality, it was something mean or unkind. Using peer pressures to get others to participate in bullying. And this I just mentioned, where if you want to go with us, then you can't bring her because, you know, she's a loser. And so that person, that girl might be in a situation where they have to choose between being mean to someone else and risking not being accepted, or going against that urge to fit in. Establishing rules for anyone who wants to be part of a social group, forming cliques, or spreading rumors and engaging in gossip. These are all things you might see in a teen or a middle school or even elementary school that suggests that that person is either perpetrating relational aggression or experiencing it. So I want to talk about some reasons why kids demonstrate relational aggression. And I really want to highlight this first one because a lot of times this isn't accounted for. It just, as parents or even as kids, they jump to the assumption that somebody who is using relational aggression to be manipulative is like, they're just a mean person. And in reality, a lot of times kids, especially in that elementary, middle, and even early high school, really struggle to figure out how to be a friend and make friends. So, we want kids to be able to initiate friendships, but then we also want them to be able to maintain friendships. So those are not necessarily overlapping skills all the time. And for kids who are really uncertain and they don't feel secure or don't have enough practice in making and keeping friends, they really can go through an inconsistent style when it comes to interacting with other girls. So there'll be times when they might demonstrate that they're really sweet, they might be very inclusive, they might share, they might even be over the top gracious, like put themselves in a position to maybe even be mistreated or used. And then other times they might act very standoffish or have like a bossy tone. Like, if you were my friend, you would wear, this outfit on Friday so we can twin together. Or, ask your mom if I can sleep over. And and if she says no, then I'm dropping you and I'm going to go hang out with everybody else for the weekend and you're out. Whatever it is sometimes these are kids who really just need very, very specific direct coaching on how to treat other people. Another thing that contributes to girls participating in relational aggression is to alleviate boredom or to create excitement. So I've talked about this before in other places that I've done presentations. And really in this age group, this young person age group, is they seek excitement. Like, they really want to have that euphoric dopamine release feeling. And so in order to do that, kids will do all sorts of things. They might play in a competitive sports game. They might really get involved in technology because a lot of technology has a lot of immediate gratification, and you switch from one thing to the next and you can make sure that content stays interesting and exciting. They might look at pornography. They might experience with substances. But one way that kids get that rush of excitement is gossip, is creating social drama. So it's not necessarily that these kids are, mean kids, but especially think of now during COVID when they don't have some of the regular forms of excitement, right? Nobody's going to amusement parks. Nobody's at school dealing with interactions in the hallway, or if they are, it's very protected because of 6-foot distancing. There's a lot of times where kids are they feel like every day is sort of the same. And so they will reach out and try to create drama to get that very developmentally appropriate need met. And oftentimes this is their clumsy way of connecting with their peers, is instead of reaching out with kindness and consistency, they might sort of start drama because this is their way to get attention. And when I say get attention, I don't mean it in they're just attention seeking. But I mean, this is their way to try to clumsily connect with a peer and form some sort of bond. And sometimes, and I think we've all experienced this, we bond with others over a shared experience. And it could be a shared triumph, or it could be a shared stressor. We also know that kids demonstrate relational aggression from peer pressure. And I've mentioned that a couple times where, if you're going to be hanging out with her, then, you're not going to be able to come to the sleepover. And so that child is faced with feeling excluded, or following through with what a peer might be urging them to do. And sometimes they might choose one way and other times they might choose a different way, but that peer influence is really playing a strong role. Sometimes kids have low self-esteem and they don't have the ability to either assert themselves or feel confident that they're a friend that's worth spending time with, regardless of whether or not this person believes so. And, I can speak for myself here in that as I got older, and by older, I mean became an adult, I recognized like, oh, if somebody doesn't treasure me the way they should, then this is a friendship I feel really good about stepping away from. But these young girls don't necessarily have that perspective to feel that way about themselves because their biggest desire is to fit in. And kids in this age group and grown-ups often have some portion of themselves that they do not feel good about, whether it's their looks or how clear their skin is and how fashionable they are, what their academic talents are, if they're into sports, if boys like them or romantic partners like them. I mean, there's just a lot of places that they can feel uncertain. And if engaging in relational aggression makes that feeling of sadness or low self-worth go away even for a little while, then sometimes that can feel really worth it. Another thing is relational aggression can eliminate competition. And what I mean by that is there tends to be kind of a pecking order in most schools or social situations where there are some girls that really do have like a higher status. And when I talk to my daughter about it, she often talks about it in terms of privileges. So she'll say, okay, these are girls who have the latest iPhone, or they're allowed to have parties when their parents aren't home, or they go on these kind of fancy spring vacations where they get to bring multiple friends. Like, these are kids who kind of have cool things, at least in a teenager's eyes. So if you are in that higher status and that there's any risk of it being, just put under stress or losing that status, sometimes this relational aggression will pop out where they'll say something unkind or ruin a reputation or get other kids to not value that friendship because it keeps them in the higher standing, the higher social status. So that to me is, as a parent, really hard to watch because there's nothing healthy about that, to feel so competitive, especially girls towards other girls, because just from a feminist perspective, we don't want that. We want girls and women to lift each other up and support each other and recognize there can be success for all of us, not just one or two. And then the last thing, which I feel is just as important as the first one I mentioned, which was the poor friendship making skills, is what's being role modeled for these girls. And I mentioned some things here like TVs, movies, social media, celebrities, and even siblings. But the thing I really want to highlight in the most tactful way possible is parents, particularly the women, the women in that child's life, whether it's a mother, whether it's aunts, or extended family member, or mom's best friends who are around. Like, if you're talking about others in a very degrading way, if you're talking about, oh my gosh, I don't know how she wears that bathing suit in public. She is way too chunky to do that. Or she thinks she's so great because she got a new car. Or, whatever it is, whatever kind of spiteful, ugly, judgmental thing that you say, and you can have the belief that you're just saying it within your own home. And you are. But when you say it in front of your child, you are teaching them to speak about others, particularly women, in that same way. So oftentimes when moms will come in and say, hey, I'm worried about my kids' social relationships, maybe they say kids are being mean to their kid, but oftentimes they'll say my kid talks about others really in a mean way or plays tricks on them. I had an incident a couple years ago where a client came in, was talking about her daughter, and she had basically done something and destroyed a friend's property. The other child had purchased something that she felt really proud of, and she couldn't wait to use it on an upcoming, weekend event. And this daughter went and destroyed it, like literally physically destroyed it. And the mother was completely blown away as to how her daughter could have done something so mean. But session after session, this parent had spoken ill about the looks of other girls, like, well, she's not as pretty as my daughter, but, and she would imply that like we should sort of feel sorry for her, or how dare these other girls think they're of the same standing as my daughter, who is way more beautiful. And so as the therapist, I had to have the really difficult job of sort of gently picking apart the type of language and verbiage and descriptors that this mom used to describe other people, whether it was the child's, social, like their peer group, or how the neighbor was, or what family members were like, or just general groups, general groups of people. And it was a difficult conversation because for one grown woman to say to another grown woman, you regularly engage in relational aggression. And you might think it's okay because you're not actually going to the neighbor and telling her she looks fat in her bikini when she's at her pool in the backyard. You're saying it in front of your girls, and they're imitating that behavior when they're with their friends. How you're speaking in this blunt way, or where you're focusing on someone's flaws versus embracing the strengths and the positivity they bring to a situation. So I really encourage people out there, especially moms, to really reflect on how they communicate about other people in front of their daughters, the types of TV and shows you watch, and how you respond. If there's times I'll be watching a show and one girl will say something mean to another, and I'll say to my kid, like, hey, do you hear how passive aggressive that comment was? Or do you hear how she's really focused on that girl's looks, or whatever it is? And it doesn't mean we're not going to watch that show, but I really want my kid to be able to pinpoint moments of relational aggression right away, so that hopefully she can have that awareness if someone's treating her that way, and honestly not take it so personally, or catch herself if she engages in that type of communication. So it does mean that you really have to adopt a communication style that's really empathic, very supportive, especially towards other women. And I do think that's something that we really stress in our home. And I have to say, one of the reasons why it's stressed in our home is I've seen both sides. I've seen it where I was a kid who had a lot of passive aggressive or kind of relational aggression directed towards me. But then I also have this best friend who I never communicate that way. We are always positive and connected and reinforcing and supportive. And there's just not room for mocking or teasing or passive aggressive comments and things like that. So to see how much that builds me up as a person, I really want the same thing for my daughter. So the impact of relational aggression. So these are things that are consequences of girls experiencing relational aggression. So we know that these girls are more likely to feel rejected. They're likely to feel that they don't do well socially, that they're socially inept, like they're incompetent in their social world. They're likely to feel unattractive, unlikable. These are girls who are more likely to show symptoms of depression or anxiety. So sadness, fretful behavior, poor sleep, physical complaints like, oh, I don't want to go, I've got a headache, or my stomach hurts, whatever it is. Like, these are kids who are showing just those stress symptoms. These are also kids who will engage in school refusal. I don't want to go to school. They'll avoid it. They'll use physical complaints to get out of school or remain home, or they'll refuse to do certain social activities, like join in an extracurricular activity or go to a social event like a school dance, or volunteer somewhere where there's going to be other peers, because they're getting in this mode of being on flight, like that fight or flight mode they just want to avoid. These are girls who are likely to have suicidal thoughts, feeling like no one likes me, no one loves me, no one would be sad if I wasn't here, I'm going to be alone forever. And it really starts to impact their feelings of self-worth. So that low self-esteem, as you see underneath suicidal thoughts. These are girls who oftentimes have poor body image or disordered eating. And of course, those can go hand in hand, because in that middle school and high school age group, one of the primary ways that kids experience self-worth is their physical appearance. If they feel their physical appearance is generally positive, and they feel their physical appearance is generally appreciated, they tend to have higher self-esteem. So you might have a kid who plays the piano beautifully, or is super smart in, some math competition. But if they feel like their physical appearance is lacking, despite all these other strengths, they are likely to experience low self-esteem. So I do encourage you as a parent to just be mindful of that. If kids express that they don't like how they look because they have severe acne or they don't have a haircut that is fashionable with other girls, I'm not saying that you should just cave to every whim physically, but if there's something that you can do to support your daughter feeling good about themselves, and it's just kind of a good common sense way, like I like to cover up my grays, I like to wear clothes that fit me and are complement my skin tone, I really enjoy wearing makeup, like I'm going to do those things for myself. And if your daughter expresses in an appropriate way that there's something that could be provided and it's within your budget and lines up with your value system, then that might be a way that you can support her. Other things we might see is declining grades, or their motivation and effort goes down. And then they also might struggle to make healthy relationships where they don't necessarily approach a peer with trust or feel like it's going to be successful. So they end up being avoidant or almost being rejecting, even when there are girls who are approaching them in a healthy way. They've just kind of been burned and they're suspicious and they don't want to be hurt again. One of the most stressful aspects of relational aggression for kids is the inconsistency of these friendships. Like most of us can handle knowing, all right, somebody doesn't like me, I'm not their cup of tea, we're not going to be friends, it is what it is, and move on. Or we can handle, this is a friend, I feel like they're loyal, I feel like they're going to be consistently kind, and they're going to either include me or they're going to appreciate my strengths. But what's very difficult about relational aggression is it's oftentimes not one or the other. It flip-flops between. It's like a seesaw where sometimes they feel accepted and other times they don't. And so they're constantly in a state of stress, wondering, is this peer going to like me today? Is she going to be nice to me today? Is she going to include me? And then they can feel kind of pathetically grateful when this person is reasonably kind, or they can be plunged into despair when this person isn't. So it's very stressful on people when we don't know exactly how we're going to be greeted in a social situation. And that honestly goes across the age span. Like think of the time that you've had a boss, where you have a boss who like sometimes loves you sometimes and loves your work and is, I'm so glad you're part of the team. And then other times they complain about you and feel like they'd be happy if you never came back to work again. And how stressful that is. It's the same way with these girls. One of the most painful aspects of relational aggression for parents is that oftentimes parents would prefer that their girls step away and just be like, if she's not a good friend to you, you just go find other friends. She's not worth it. And a lot of times girls will keep going back for more. And so as parents, that can make us feel like we've done a bad job. Like, how are we raising this kid to be consistently mistreated by this peer group or by this particular girl? And yet they keep going back and they're not separating from the friendship. And so that's very stressful for parents. And some of that is just comes from immaturity. And it's really hard to step away from a friendship that you have hope is going to work out. And then also, if the peer group, like if the popular peer group or the peer group that they just want to be part of is like limited, right? I mean, sometimes your kids are, let's say, for example, they participate in a youth group and there's 2 or 3 girls there who are kind of the popular girls, but then there's maybe only 6 other girls there. Like there's just not necessarily enough girls in that situation where you can go and form an additional group. You're either part of this awesome group or you're out. And in that situation, a lot of times girls will take what they can get, even if it's inconsistent, versus just saying, okay, I'm going to be here by myself in the corner. So that can be really difficult for grown women to understand because, of course, as grown women, we get a lot more choice in who we hang out with. So how you can help your child? Absolutely be a good listener. Sometimes we're tempted to immediately go into fix-it mode, and that can be invalidating to our girls and their emotions. Like sometimes they just need to vent, they need to get sympathy, they need you to role model empathic feelings. And like I said, it can be tempting for us to move on past that part of it and get to the part where we start making some sort of change. It's important to limit your child's social media so that they're not being inundated all day long with seeing, oh, this girl was tagged in a photo and I wasn't, or these kids all went to Starbucks and got drinks together and took pictures and they didn't include me. Like, let them have a break from it. Let them have some time where they just disengage from all of that peer drama and engage in activities that feel good to them, whether they're reading a book or listening to music or walking the dog or going out to dinner with their family. Like, when they're home, there needs to be a portion of their day where the home is a sanctuary, where they just feel good, they're separated from that. I really want to encourage parents out there to make sure that other family members don't tease that girl, like, oh, you don't have anywhere to go on Saturday? Like, what a loser. Or, I saw you crying yesterday because Sarah left you out. Like, there's times I hear family members, and it's well-meaning. They might be trying to just be lighthearted, but this is something that is very wounding for your girl. So making sure that everybody in the family is just kind and inclusive and positive and compliments in a very realistic, authentic way the strengths of that girl. They do not need to have that same sort of rejection communication happening at home too. Make sure they continue to be involved in activities of interest. So this is the goal behind this, is having them have some natural socialization during other activities, like if they're on a team or they take music lessons, but also have them recognize that they're not only defined by their social standing. Teach them not to fear conflict. And by that, I mean conflict is a truly appropriate and normal part of every relationship, whether it's a friendship or it's a relationship with family members. But the goal is to teach them to learn to resolve it. We know when we study friendships, we know that friends, true friends, have higher rates of conflict than two people who are not friends. But the defining characteristic is that they can resolve it. That's the part. It's not that friends don't have conflict. It's that friends are motivated to show their conflict resolution skills to get through it. So they make repairs in that relationship and move on. So we don't want kids to think that if they ever have a conflict with a friend, that must mean this friendship's over, or it's not, it can't be tolerated, or it can't be repaired, because that's not true. We actually know that successful friends do have conflict, but they can resolve them. And then also making sure that your child has some skills to have a way to assert themselves, whether it's really letting a teacher know if something is just too much for them or they're feeling overwhelmed, making sure that you keep the lines of communication open with your daughter so that she can either speak up for herself or just develop some ways to respond to relational aggression, just some scripts that she'll have in her back pocket to use if somebody is behaving that way. And then also really encouraging your daughter to be like that upstander, the person who stands by the side of somebody who is experiencing relational aggression. And I don't mean they need to, fight them, but just to include that other person and let them know they're not alone and be kind and supportive versus, I don't want to stand next to the girl who's on the outs with everyone today because, I don't want to be like her. And then they, continue to reject that girl. Like, you have to teach your girl to show the compassion towards others. All right. So I went a little bit over on time, which I apologize for. I would love to hear if there's any questions.
Meredith sentence. I worry that my teen is the one who directs relational aggression towards others. What can I do to discourage this behavior?
So for this question, it really is important for parents to help their girls identify what relational aggression is, and then also to be able to identify it in real life. So, for example, on TV shows, you might talk about it. You might say, hey, that was a really passive-aggressive comment, or notice how they're excluding her. I think there's a lot of examples that we can do as women in real life. Like recently, I was in a store, and I can't remember what somebody said, but we were having a conversation, and I mentioned that I'm a therapist. And they made a comment like, I don't know, almost like oh, you get to take advantage of people who are experiencing COVID. Like that must really help your business. As though I would be like glad that my business gets to expand during the terrible experience that everybody's having with COVID. And it was really kind of a mean girl kind of anti-woman comment to be sort of disparaging me because I have the ability to have a successful business during COVID, kind of a shame on me experience. And so I didn't, respond. I don't care about this woman's opinion. And I left and I said, you see how that was like very anti-woman to say something to try to have me experience shame because I am in a position where I'm very needed during this time. Like I was supposed to feel guilty, for being able to provide a service that could be helpful and in turn be earning money when other people are unemployed. And my daughter was able to recognize like, yeah, that was really like such a passive aggressive kind of shaming comment. And that was just me as a grown woman. And so there's so many opportunities just in the real world to identify relational aggression. But then on top of that, if you're a parent who's great at supervising your kids' social media, and when you look at the comments that your kids might be seeing on whether it's other people's posts or the types of things your kid says to other people, there's a lot of opportunity to point out when your kid is engaging in that behavior. One of the things that's really common that girls do is, so one girl will say something mean. So let's say it's girl A will say something mean about girl B. And then girl C, who might be my daughter, tells girl B that girl A said something mean. And I'm like, you understand that is relational aggression. Like girl B would not have known that girl A said something unkind if you hadn't told them. Like you were the one who introduced the drama. You might think that the girl who originally spoke about the other girl is the one who was doing it, but that could have been prevented if you just stayed out of it. And there's a lot of times that girls really benefit from parents discussing those characteristics to make sure that they really understand how to do it. And if your kid keeps doing it over and over, they might need a break from Instagram for a while, or they might need to have a break from some of their social interactions. Like you're not going to go to this girl's birthday party and spend time engaging in a relational aggression with no consequence. So it might be really important that you really enforce that value system in your home by making sure they understand that you're not going to tolerate it if your daughter's doing it. Okay, so I hope that answers that question. Is there any other ones? I think we have a second question, right?
Let's see. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Awesome.
So I see Julie's.
Yes, there's a question. Julie's question. I'm trying to get it on my phone to see. It says, my daughter has been excluded from a couple of events from this group of girls that she's friends with. One girl in particular has said and done some hurtful things to my daughter. Should I call the girl's mom myself to get this handled?
Okay, this is a really great question that I hear all the time. A lot of the answer to this depends on a couple things. One, the age of your daughter. So if your daughter's an 11th grader in high school, I would advise against this because they're just too old and it's going to cause conflict between you and the other mother, especially if you don't have a close relationship. And the older our kids get, the less likely we are to know our kids' friends' parents. If it's a young child, right? If you got a 3rd grader, a 6th grader, kind of in that, anywhere in elementary school for sure, and even into middle school, where you can call them up and say a couple, just give the parent a heads up that these two girls are struggling. And I think I made a slide later in the presentation. I just want to show you guys. Okay, so what this is some examples of ways that parents can reach out to another parent in a really tactful, nurturing way versus an accusatory way. So on the left, I have some things that parents might say. So the first one, our girls haven't been getting along well lately. Seems like they're not using kind language. Have you noticed anything? Is different than Sarah keeps bullying Jada. You need to talk to her. So if parents approach an interaction like that in an accusatory way, without a doubt, that parent is likely to get very defensive and the conversation isn't going to go anywhere. If you go into the conversation with the spirit of understanding that your girl might be part of that dynamic, because like I said, it flip-flops a lot. It's rare that one girl is always the victim and the other one is always the perpetrator. So if you go in sort of acknowledging that there's discord between these two girls with the spirit of what can we do to support them through this, we, not you and your girl, but what we can do to support them, because this is a really tough time in their development, then that chances are that's going to go better. Another example, hi, fellow mama, middle school is so hard. Jade is having a hard time dealing with all the ups and downs socially. I know she values the friendship with Sarah, but it seems like they're struggling. I'm wondering if we can do anything to help. And so notice there's things like we, and she talks about her own child. My child is struggling. Versus saying your girl is being mean. And then the example that is less productive, Sarah says Jada is being mean to all the other girls, gossiping and saying untrue things. I wanted to let you know so you could punish her before no one wants to be friends with her anymore. So in that type of communication is a threat. If you don't control your daughter, no one's going to like her. If you don't control your daughter, my daughter's going to use relational aggression against her. That is not helpful communication. So if you can't approach the interaction with the other parent in a collaborative way, either you're too upset or you're just not well practiced at that type of communication, I would not advise it. In that situation, if you really feel like your kid needs support from an adult, you might want to go directly to school and speak to the school counselor, an administrator, the class teacher, and just say, these girls are having a hard time. I don't have a relationship with the other girl's mom. Can you keep an eye out on this? Can you keep an eye out for this? And oftentimes teachers will sit girls down and just really explore like, hey, I notice you guys are having a hard time. And whether there needs to be an apology or there needs to be a clarification about an interaction that maybe one girl misinterpreted or one girl didn't show good friendship making skills. That might be a role that's better off left to the teacher or the school counselor than parents getting involved. I had an incident as a mother where there was a boy who did something aggressive and inappropriate to my daughter on the school bus. And it was a child in my neighborhood. And when I called the mother and I said, hey, this is what my child's reporting. And I just want to let you know this is how she experienced it. And I don't want to speak to what your boy may or may not have done, but I just wanted to let you know that this is how she perceived it. And the mother was immediately like, my boy would never do that. She didn't say my kid was a liar, but she felt like, your girl's too sensitive. And the types of comments that had been made towards my daughter were sexually suggestive. And she certainly understands. And I certainly believe her when she says boys treated her that way. So when the mom was so in denying, she wasn't abusive towards me, but she was so not interested in being part of healthy communication. I just called the school and said, hey, this happened on the bus. I don't want my daughter being in this environment. You handle it. And I just let it go. And, but I did have a discussion with my daughter about how, what role I was going to take, where she had choice. Sometimes we might talk to our kids and say, well, what do you think? Would this be a good idea to maybe let the teacher know? And then also letting kids know that they don't have a choice. In a situation where my child experienced sexually explicit comments on a bus when she was there by herself is not tolerable. So if my kid had said, no, mom, I don't want you to say anything, how embarrassing. For me, that wasn't a choice because she was potentially in an unsafe situation. Like her safety was impacted. It wasn't like, I don't know, so-and-so was giving me dirty looks and I just think she was talking about me. Like that situation might be very unpleasant, but it wasn't a safety situation. So it is really important that you collaborate with your teen or your kid, but you recognize that sometimes as the adult, you may have to make a decision about how to advocate for your kid. And there's a chance your kid won't always like it. But I really do encourage parents to be mindful if somebody is bullying them online there's definitely steps you want to take to stop it. But one of the things you don't want to do is punish your kid when they were the victim. Well, I'm just going to take away all your social media and you can just take a break from your phone for a month. Well, from their perspective, they were just punished because they shared with you that they were having a hard time. Like, we don't want to punish kids for confiding in us and looking for support. We might say, I see how upset you are. Why don't you take a break from your phone for the night? We're going to watch a movie together. I'll paint your toenails. Like, let's just take a break because you've had a hard day with this. And I know this is stressing you out. And then we'll just approach it fresh tomorrow. Or we might talk about the benefits of blocking a particular person. But to get to a point where you're sort of, punishing your kid because they experience this and they lose connection and they lose just the cool factor, right, of having social media and feeling like they fit in with their peers because somebody was using relational aggression against them. Like, we do have to be mindful to not do that to our girls. All right. So just in summary, I just want to remind you of my contact information. If you have any questions to follow up with this, please email me at drtaraegan@gmail.com. And we have these weekly webinars. An upcoming webinar, probably the one we do next week, is going to be a follow-up to this one where we talk about that invisible girl, okay? Not necessarily the girl who's experiencing tons of relational aggression, but just the one who just maybe is introverted, doesn't seem to feel real connected to her peers, maybe a little lonely, just the not favorite friend, because that is different than the kid who's actively being mistreated through relational aggression. So that's going to be our next presentation next week. So if you are a parent who's listening to this and you have a friend who has girls who might benefit from this information, have them join in and they can be part of it live next week. And we can also give them access to this one if making sure to put it in context for them. Also be mindful to join our private Facebook group that I mentioned earlier called Adolescence, a Parent's Guide, a support group for high school parents. And then each Wednesday, tune in to One Day You'll Thank Me, our parenting podcast. And we are just about ready to wrap up our first season. We have 3 more episodes of this season, and then we're going to roll right into season 2. So go ahead and subscribe, catch up on the episodes that feel relevant to you. Feel free to email to suggest topics that you'd like to see in the future or hear about in the future, and then we'll go from there. So thank you so much for your attention today. I really appreciate it.